All right, let's talk about note durations. This should be a review for most people that are in either instrumental or vocal ensembles, but in case you're not sure how to read note values, hopefully this slideshow will help you out. Um, some things to remember. Music notation is symbolic, so we're not using any sort of graph system for rhythm. We just have to memorize what the symbols mean, and then we use those to figure out what the rhythm is. Each symbol that we're going to talk about represents a specific duration, and that the relationship between the symbols is almost always based on either doubling or halving the duration. So when we look at the different symbols, usually the next symbol that we look at after that will either be half the length or twice as long. And finally, they're based on a measure of 4/4 time, or a total length of 4 beats. We kind of use the dollar currency model for that, where you have a dollar, which is 4 quarters long. You've got half dollars, quarters. After that, it really doesn't apply, but you can use that as a basic way of thinking about the notation. So we're just going to go through these symbols really quick here. Whole note represents a whole measure in 4/4 time. So a whole note has a value of 4 counts or 4 beats. It's just a simple oval. Half note represents half of a measure or half of a whole note, which would be 2 counts in duration or in value. That's the open oval with a stem. Quarter note is quarter of a measure, so that it gets 1 beat, and that's usually the basic building block of most music notation systems, or is going to be the quarter note. And then we just fill in the oval, and we still have the stem. We've got our eighth note, which is 1/8 of a measure of 4/4 time, or there are 8 of them in one measure. The duration is a half of a count, so 2 eighth notes equals 1 quarter note. When you have a single flag that always hangs to the right, regardless of if the stem is going up or down, so you can see how those are drawn. Most of the time in instrumental music, eighth notes will be beamed either in groups of 2 or groups of 4, or even sometimes groups of 3 or other weird things. We'll get to that some other day maybe. We can keep going with this. 16th note is 1/16 of a measure, or there are 16 of them in a measure of 4/4 time. Looks a lot like an eighth note, except that it has a double flag or a double beam, right? And there are 4 16th notes and 1 quarter note, so it's a quarter of a quarter. It gets pretty confusing the lower we go here. You can keep going with this pattern. We're not going to explore that today, but obviously you've got a 32nd note, a 64th note. Those are a little bit more rare, but you might encounter those in more advanced literature. So here's our pyramid of note durations. And each time you go down one level, if you start at the top and go down a level, each time you go down a level, you're splitting the notes in half, or the durations in half. So you've got a whole note, which is 4 beats. Next thing down, you've got half notes, which are 2. Split that into half. Quarter notes, 1 beat. Split that into eighth notes. Split that into 16th notes. The rest symbols are very similarly structured in that your whole rest is worth 4 beats, your half rest is worth 2 beats, quarter rest, which is the little lightning bolt there, 1 beat. And then once you get to eighth notes, you get that little, looks almost like a fancy 7, I guess. And then 16th notes, you'll have 2 little doodads on there. 32nd note, you'd have 3 ad infinitum. That's great for doing things that are of even value or even number values. If you want to get something that's a different duration, or a really weird thing, there's 2 ways to do that. You can either create a tie or add a dot to the note. Okay, tied notes. A tie is basically a curved line that connects 2 notes of the same pitch. Okay, so that'd have to be the same line or space that they're connected, and then you just combine the duration. So the first example there, you've got a quarter note, which is 1 count, plus an eighth note, which is half a count, and that would equal 1.5 counts. Or 2 plus 1 being 3, 4 plus 4 is 8. You'll notice that that tie actually goes over the bar line. That is perfectly okay to do with ties. I've actually played music where you might have 8 eighth notes that are all tied together over the bar line. Dots are a little bit more fancy way of doing that, but it's a little bit more elegant way of doing it because you don't have to have all those ties in there. What each dot does is it adds half the value of whatever precedes it. So if you've got a half note, which is 2 counts, adding a dot after that is going to add 1 count because that's half of 2. Then you add that all together, 2 plus 1 is 3. Dotted quarter note's 1 beat, half of a quarter note is half a beat, that's 1.5 beats. That would be the same as your quarter note tied to an eighth note. Dotted eighth note would be 3/4 of a beat, and that would usually be followed by a 16th note. And then the last thing we have there is a double dotted half note. So you've got a half note, which is 2 counts. The first dot adds half of 2, which would be 1. So now we're up to 3. The second dot adds half of the thing that precedes it, which is a dot, which is worth 1. So that one actually equals 3.5 counts. That would not equal 4 counts or something else. Double dotted half note, 3.5 counts. It's not as common, but it is used. And that's it for note durations.